Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for latest updates.
Now I need to get my thoughts ready and go tell the workers. I'm sure they are going to be a little mad because everyone thinks that one person can beat the whole company, but I don't think so. Richard Rawlings made a big business with Fast and Loud. But in the end, his days got really bad when a big surprise showed a part of the show nobody saw coming. Come with us as we find out what really happened behind those garage doors. How Fast and Loud became famous. Fast and Loud became one of the most talked about reality shows on Discovery Channel. It followed a small group of smart car fixers and builders who worked in a garage in Dallas, Texas. This place was called Gas Monkey Garage, and it became famous for taking old, broken cars and making them into powerful machines that could get people's attention. Richard Rawlings was the main person. He drove all over the country looking for cars that had been left to fall apart. Then the team had to find a way to fix them up and sell them. Richard had started Gas Monkey Garage in 2002. Before working with cars all the time, he ran a printing business called Lincoln Press. When he sold that company in 2004, he was able to put all his time into his real love, building cars. For him, the goal wasn't just to fix and sell cars. He wanted each job to be special and different from others. They took apart the broken cars, built them up with new parts, and gave them a look that made people stare. People who buy cars from different parts of the world soon wanted his builds. When Discovery Channel saw this energy, it turned the idea into a show in 2012. The name they picked was Fast and Loud, and cameras followed the whole trip. People got to watch every step from when Richard found a beat-up car somewhere to the final moment when it rolled out shiny and fixed. Nothing was kept secret. People saw the problems, the delays, the long hours, and the fun times that came along the way. Each team member was good at different things, and when they put it all together, the results looked amazing. The way the show was made got fans right away. Car lovers watched to see how a pile of rust could become a cool ride, while others watched just to see the excitement of change. Every show followed the same pattern. The team brought a forgotten car into the garage, took it apart piece by piece, and then built it back up. Many cars hadn't been on a road in many years. Some had no engines. Some had frames that were barely staying together. Still, the crew kept working, argued when things got stressful, laughed when things worked out, and pushed hard to finish before time ran out. One big moment of the series came when Richard and Aaron Kaufman, the garage's best builder, joined a motorcycle contest. This event put them against well-known names like Orange County Choppers, Jesse James, and Paul Jr. Designs. It made them step away from their usual car jobs and prove they were good. They put lots of energy into the motorcycle, worked through problems, and ended up getting second place. Even without first place, the challenge brought more people to Gas Monkey Garage and made them more important in the custom car world. As Fast and Loud got more successful, it made new shows. Misfit Garage followed some old Gas Monkey workers who started their own shop. Another spin-off, Fast and Loud Demolition Theater, let the crew look back at old clips, laugh about past problems, and remember crazy moments. These spin-offs kept fans happy and gave them more stories to enjoy. Behind the scenes, Pilgrim Studios handled making the show. Producers Craig Polyagin and Eddie Roter worked hard to keep the episodes moving with speed and excitement. The show didn't just do well on TV. It built up a strong online group, too. In 2016, a study by the New York Times found that Fast and Loud had one of the biggest Facebook groups out of 50 shows they looked at. It also had the most male fans compared to the rest. That wide support kept the series going for 8 years, running strong from 2012 until 2020. But like many long trips, this one came to an end. The show didn't stop because fans lost interest. It stopped because of bigger problems that had built up through the years. Over those years, Fast and Loud became more than a program. It became part of a movement where people found happiness in watching forgotten things get fixed up and made useful again. The work was never easy, but the reward always showed in the final build. Richard and his crew were able to share their love for cars with millions of people around the world, and that made the hard work worth it. But over the years, several workers got into trouble with him. Once that happens, they usually leave the garage not long after, and their reasons seem to be similar. Richard Rawlings' bad side on and off the screen. Richard Rawlings always seemed to be around drama. His name often came up when workers talked about fights or sudden exits. A fight would start, voices would get loud, and then the worker would be gone. Meanwhile, the most shocking exit came when Aaron Kaufman, Rawlings' main mechanic, suddenly disappeared. For viewers, it seemed like he had just vanished. Later on, Kaufman explained that he left because the workplace no longer worked for him. He felt trapped and unable to try the ideas he wanted to. His leaving was a big loss, but he was far from the only mechanic who left Gas Monkey Garage. Another dramatic incident began with what seemed like a normal problem. A visitor stopped by the garage one day and asked to take a photo next to Rawlings' Rolls-Royce. To most people, that request looked harmless. But the garage manager saw it differently. When mechanic Smith and Butler let the visitor take the picture, the manager got very angry. He yelled at them and scolded them harshly, making it clear he would not let it go. Smith didn't stay quiet. He yelled back with his own words, using insults that only made things worse. What started as a small disagreement got out of control. Before long, both Smith and Butler were kicked out of Gas Monkey Garage. Rawlings wasted no time in showing them the door. He later explained that the two had always been hard to deal with and getting rid of them felt like the best choice. Yet for Smith and Butler, the story did not end there. Instead of going away, they stepped into a new chapter and soon found themselves back in front of cameras. Not long after leaving, Smith and Butler joined forces with two other skilled Texans. One was Scott McMillan, who had once worked under Rawlings as well. The other, Thomas Weeks, had a style that made him different. Together, the four men decided to build their own dream. They opened a new garage, gave it the name Fired Up, and with Discovery Channel behind them, they started a show of their own. By October of 2014, Misfit Garage had made its first appearance on television. The format had familiar parts. Each episode showed the team chasing down old cars and giving them a new life. Sometimes people brought their cars in for repairs or fixing up. Other times, the crew hit the road, searching for hidden treasures in fields, barns, or auctions. Once they found a car, they brought it back, took it apart, and worked on it piece by piece. Their methods mixed classic techniques with bold new ideas. But it wasn't always smooth. The crew often fought over details, arguing about how to handle certain fixes or which design worked best. This back and forth created tension, but it also kept the show alive. Although behind the scenes, the work was harder than it looked. They often faced deadlines which pushed them to think quickly and solve problems fast. The process brought out both their creativity and their bad tempers. The journey forward was never smooth, but they kept pushing, hoping that their new garage would stay strong. Still, something about the show felt wrong. The setup. When Fired Up Garage first came on television, it was shown as a brand new shop that had broken away from Gas Monkey Garage. It stood on its own with its own team, its own rules, and its own future. Many viewers believed it was a place that had broken out from Richard Rawlings' shadow. Yet behind the scenes, the truth was different. Richard never really let go. He had built Gas Monkey Garage into a well-known name. And even when Fired Up tried to stand alone, he kept his control firmly in place. From the first season, his influence could be felt everywhere. He was not just a guest on screen, but the executive producer, and that job gave him power over almost every detail of the show. He could set the direction of the series, shape how the stories happened, and cut down anything that did not match his vision. The garage looked like a place where mechanics worked freely, but really, the flow of each episode moved the way Richard wanted. The cars that rolled into Fired Up Garage were never chosen by accident. Each one was picked for a reason, often designed to build up drama or even failure. The repairs were done with the cameras in mind. Steps that could bring more tension or entertainment were pushed forward while other parts were cut away. Richard decided what got shown and what got left out. So the final story of each build was the story he wanted the audience to see. Control of money gave him even more power. Every dollar went through his hands, and that meant he decided how far a build could go. He could give enough money to make a car shine, or he could hold back money, so the mechanics had to cut corners and struggle through. When spending was cut down, the crew had to fight harder and their struggles created even more drama for the cameras. By holding the budget, Richard held another string that shaped the show in the direction he chose. His control did not stop there. He also owned the garage space itself. The roof over the team's head belonged to him, making him not just a producer, but also the landlord. This gave him another way to have authority, since the fired-up crew worked in a place he controlled. He could step in whenever he wanted, and often he did. Richard would walk in without warning. Sometimes he started arguments. Sometimes he made jokes at the expense of the mechanics, and sometimes he threw in problems that pushed the team off balance. On screen, he often came across as a troublemaker who enjoyed throwing obstacles in the path of the team. Yet behind the scenes, he also had reasons to want the garage to succeed. As both producer and landlord, he made money from its survival. But the way he stepped in often made it harder for the crew to move forward. His actions pulled them back while still creating entertainment that kept viewers watching. His name stayed in the credits beside Eddie Roters, who was seen as the leader of the show. Richard was also marked down as creative talent, a title that was never fully explained, but gave him the ability to shape the tone and rhythm of the series. Whether through his job as executive producer, landlord, creative talent, or on-screen guest, Richard pulled more strings until the project looked tied to him from all sides. Reports later said that Richard made close to $22,000 each time he showed up on screen. That number explained why he kept walking into the garage and stirring things up. His appearances created ratings, and ratings brought profit. Fired Up Garage was shown as the rival of Gas Monkey Garage, but Richard's ties proved the separation was only an idea for the cameras. As episodes went on, people began to catch on. What was sold as a true fight between two garages started to look more like a storyline written to entertain. When all of his jobs were lined up, the budget, the ownership of the garage space, the management of the image, and the profit from his appearances, they formed a bigger picture. Fired Up Garage, though dressed up as an independent shop, was still under his control. Both garages, which were meant to stand apart, moved under the same plan. Richard Rawlings knew how to turn drama into money, and his grip kept hold of the show, no matter how it was presented. Losing control, Richard Rawlings was riding on the success of his hit television show when he decided to push his brand into new territory. He saw a chance to take that fame beyond the garage. The idea soon became real as a restaurant and entertainment spot, which became known as Gas Monkey Bar and Grill. Richard was not interested in running a restaurant himself. So, he made a deal with investors who would handle the business. He licensed out the Gas Monkey name and logo, keeping his job tied to branding rather than day-to-day work. On paper, it was a smooth arrangement, but the reality quickly grew complicated. By September of 2013, the bar finally opened just a short drive from the famous Gas Monkey garage. At first, it had the same lively energy that Richard's fans expected. The place had live shows, themed decorations, and plenty of food and drinks. Crowds came in quickly, and Richard would show up now and then, giving the spot a boost. The safest looked polished, but underneath, conflict was already brewing. During construction, Richard had gained a reputation for being disruptive. Reports from employees described him as difficult, slowing down projects and treating workers poorly. His behavior became such a problem that Daniel Flaherty, the managing partner, decided to ban him from the construction site so that progress could continue. This move showed the imbalance in control. Richard's name was on the brand, but Flaherty and the investors held authority over the business office itself. This early clash planted seeds of anger that never went away. Even after the doors opened, tension stayed. Richard continued to put himself into matters of the bar, even though his agreement had left operations to the investors. For the investors, this constant interference felt like a violation. From Richard's perspective, however, his brand was on display, so he believed he had the right to step in. By 2015, arguments had shifted toward money. Richard wanted access to financial records, claiming he was not being given the full picture. Emails between him and Flaherty showed a widening gap in trust. In 2016, Richard tried to take over the business by buying out the investors. The attempt fell apart because he could not gather the money to close the deal. His failure left the investors in control. While Richard remained on the sidelines, the relationship got worse in 2017 when an outside buyer showed interest in buying both Gas Monkey Bar and Grill and Gas Monkey Live. It could have been a major step forward for the brand, but just as the sale was close to being completed, Richard stepped in and stopped the transaction. The investors believed he acted out of frustration over his failed buyout attempt. They accused him of spreading false information about them and ruining the deal. Their anger reached the courtroom when in June 2018, Flaherty and the bar filed a lawsuit against Richard. They demanded $6 million, claiming he had destroyed their chance at a profitable sale, damaged their reputation, and broken the licensing agreement. Richard, unwilling to back down, responded by denying all charges. Through his attorney, he argued that the lawsuit was only a way for the bar to keep benefiting from his name. In 2019, he filed his own countersuit. This time, he accused the bar of misusing his trademark. He insisted that he had already canceled their right to use the Gas Monkey brand the previous year, but that they kept posting online and running promotions under the name. He also criticized them for pushing products like whiskey using his logo without permission, something he said clashed with the image he had worked hard to build. Richard's countersuit went even further, accusing the bar of hosting events that clashed with the family-friendly identity he wanted his brand to carry. He also argued that they had stopped paying him licensing fees even though they kept using his fame to attract customers. With that, he demanded $1 million in unpaid fees and damages. The battle looked set to drag on, but in August of 2019, both sides reached a settlement. The details were kept private, but the outcome was clear. The bar could no longer use the Gas Monkey name. This brought their messy partnership to a close. 2 years later, in 2021, the venue rebranded as Amplified. It shifted its attention toward music and food, leaving behind any ties to Richard Rawlings and Gas Monkey. What began as a bold move to expand the Gas Monkey empire turned into years of conflict, accusations, and failed deals. The bar carried the weight of Richard's image, but was never truly his. The clash between creative ownership and business control left behind a story full of disputes that stretched across nearly a decade, ending only when both sides finally walked away from each other. Meanwhile, Richard Rawlings was already threading a new path. Breaking free, final days on Fast and Loud. When Fast and Loud first came on screen in 2012, it grabbed attention right away. Car lovers from every corner tuned in to watch Richard Rawlings and his Gas Monkey garage crew take on various tasks. For years, the program looked steady. The fans kept watching, the builds kept rolling out, and the team stayed busy. Sadly, in 2020, the long run came to an end. The stop was sudden and it left many followers wondering what had happened. There was no warning, no clear reason explained. Viewers kept waiting, hoping for a word of return, but nothing came. Richard, meanwhile, had already started thinking of where he wanted to go next, even before the cameras went off. During the years of filming, another dream had started to grow inside him. He wanted to try new things, to step away from the strict routine that came with the show. He began to imagine creating a podcast about cars, a place where he could speak his mind, share his views, and open up without limits. But the road toward that ideal wasn't smooth. His deal with Discovery set up walls that stood in his way. The contract tied him down in heavy ways. He couldn't talk about the network in a negative light without risking fines that could reach up to $25,000 each time. That kind of threat weighed on him. It meant he had to hold back to measure every word. On top of that, the agreement kept him from working with other companies, shutting the door to outside chances. What looked like success on the surface carried chains underneath, and those chains grew tighter with each season. Richard kept going, showing up to film, putting his energy into every build, but the sense of being trapped started to grow stronger. He had fresh ideas waiting to come out, yet there was no space to bring them forward. His team felt it, too. They wanted to try new styles, change directions, and add different touches to the projects, but the walls kept standing in their way. They pushed against those limits, but the show's rules kept pulling them back. In time, Richard saw that staying would only keep him stuck in the same circle. He made the hard choice to walk away from Discovery, ending a long run that had shaped much of his career. Leaving wasn't easy, after so many years of work, but he understood that stepping out was the only way to move forward. He had to take control of his own future. Once free, he turned his focus to YouTube. Under the Gas Monkey Garage name, he built a channel where no one else had control. He started from the ground up, filming, posting, and reaching out to fans on his own terms. Slowly, the channel began to grow. People who had followed Fast and Loud found him again online and stuck with him on this new road. The views went up, The community built itself back, and the work took on a new shape. It wasn't only about car builds anymore. It was also about telling his story his way. Even though